Alright, back at it again. I'm just airing out my thoughts. This time I have Sheen on because, my asthma it's allergy season and it's getting real bad. Um, one of the things I was thinking about earlier today, I was getting like recollection, and I just realized that sometimes other people's actions are scary, and it's like that. And initially, that statement is very obvious, right? If somebody is perceived violent, right, or they're doing violent actions, I guess, perception and violence is something else, right? If someone says something aggressive to you, if someone bucks up to you, you know what I'm saying, you're gonna in turn see that person as violent if they raise their voice, etc., etc. But there are actions that are not harmful that perceivably that can make you uncomfortable, or that really put you in a position where you are very fearful in regards to this person. Just one of the things I was thinking about was, whenever I've been in my relationships, there's like a certain face that your partner makes, that my partner's made at me, that almost dictates like, I'm very comfortable around you. And that joke is kind of terrifying. I'm not gonna lie. It's like a very relaxed kind of feeling, kind of like, what's the word I'm looking for? Demeanor? Yeah. Very relaxed type of demeanor that they have. And it throws me off so much. I hate it because now there's this perceived notion in my head, like, oh no, somebody cares about me now, right? Somebody externally cares about me, and that's kind of whack, because part of their emotional like, I guess stability sounds kind of narcissistic in that way, but you've kind of become a part of their emotional cycle, I guess. Cycle's not a good word. Emotional state, right? You present a very common function in their state. I know this sounds like super, super methodical when I'm putting it this way, but it's basically like, oh, another nigga that cares for me, that's not like my family, right? And it's not like it's not even like a platonic thing either, right? You can tell. Like, there are niggas that care about you deeply that are just your friends still, that they'll go out of your way to do stuff for you, or you can just like be around them, and there's like a different type of energy for that still. But like, niggas are, when a person looks at you in that way, where it's almost like it's like a comforting smile, almost, is the best way I can kind of describe it. I think the look might be different for different people, but I think there's, at a certain point, you can kind of discern that. It kind of puts a pit in my stomach almost thinking about it, because it's like, oh Lord. It's almost like a responsibility that you have now. And I'm just at a point where I'm like, responsibilities... external responsibility is, I don't think I can handle that. Not in that way, right? That'd be like having a kid, right? In some far-reaching form, right? Because another nigga's emotional well-being is put on your shoulders in some form or fashion, right? It's not the end-all be-all, right? Obviously, ideally, you don't want your partner to be overly reliant on you, but, spending that quality time with people is inherently part of being together, and there's like an emotional bonding that goes on with it too. It's right, and so there's a you can play a very strong role in somebody's life, and I hate that. Right? Not that it's not like I would rather people look up to me because I'm like, haha, I love having people look up to me type deal. It's cool, but like at this point, friendship is a lot easier to manage than playing a major emotional role significantly where you have the potential to hurt someone more significantly sometimes than a friend would. Right, because anybody's capable of hurting anybody at like a deep emotional level, I think. They can just, if you're vulnerable enough with someone, they can kind of take and twist the things that make you feel the worst if you've exposed yourself to that person and just kind of throw it back in your face. I think about that a lot too, where it's like being in a relationship is kind of like a known, the further you get into it, the more it's going to sting whenever you come out of it, right? The more you put into a relationship is that more oftentimes than not is how often you're going to get, like, it's like going to be whiplash if you, it's like, yeah, you're like pulling back like a rubber band, and if you end up like splitting it off with someone, it's like the rubber band releases and it just hits you. Frick! It just hurts. Sometimes the pain is a lot longer lasting than getting hit by a rubber band, but you understand what I mean. I hope. If not, well, I'm sure I can explain it further. Yeah, no. That's kind of whack, so. What's really strange? It feels strange for me to, like, feel this way, but, like, I kind of have a friend crush on someone. I've had a friend crush on this person for quite a long while. And it's really strange because, like, there's not any particular circumstance that would cause a friendship, I guess. I guess most friendships just kind of start out with people just talking to each other. I don't know. I don't really think about that whenever I do that. I'm a pretty friendly guy, but if something's like making me nervous, it'll take me like 15 attempts to go and talk to someone, because I'm like, dang, what if, and then eventually I'm like, okay, cool. Alright, hold on. Started to equalize. Cool. So, but yeah, if I remember, recently there was a campus composers concert, and being a music composition major, I had some of my things on the program. So, obviously I went. I was also playing in one of the pieces too, so, even more so. And there is a very profound, significant person in the Black community that came through. And, he's very impactful at the campus. And so I was like, oh, shoot. Yo, it's him. This is the guy with a street named after him. He's right there. I was just talking to my friend about it beforehand, like right before I went upstairs to the main lobby. And I was like, oh, shoot. There he is right there. And, something in me, I was like, let me just go up there and like talk to him. I said, hey, thank you so much for being here. He said, well, thank you. What's your name? And, it's like an initial introduction, but it was really, really cool. Always such a nice person. He was always like very impactful in the community, and just like the stories you hear about him is just like next level. I want to try and be like that when I'm older. Just a very nice person that's able to give back to my community. Gotta find a community I care about first, I guess. Dang, that junk was loud. But yeah, like it was really cool to be there, to meet him. And then he thanked me afterwards. He said, "Thank you so much, young man." I was like, "Of course, of course." It was sick ass. Like yeah. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, like meeting people, friend crush, right? Because I mean, I guess. Oh, it's so it's you know, that's part of being like, I guess, out of this, like the rigid guidelines of being a man. I don't know. Niggas don't really talk about this that much. It's basically what I'm thinking about. Niggas don't talk about that much, and it feels kind of weird bringing it up, but it's like, I don't know what's weird about it. Like, right, you want to be friends with someone. However, in this case, I mean, I'm just not. I feel very. What is it called? At odds, I guess is the word. Is the phrase I would use, because there's no like relevant context in which, this person and I would be in the same, like, whatchamacallit, as each other, and would have, I mean, outside common interests, if that makes sense. Yeah, either way, because I keep these vague because I put these out in the public, and so it's like, not that like a bunch of people are gonna be paying attention to the channel, but it's like, like, what if, not trying to like you to give out a bunch of different names, but it's really cool. Because the boys and I were at the pool today, having a good time playing pool basketball, and her name came up in the conversation because I don't even remember why. Oh yeah, she plays basketball at the school, and they've all just kind of become NPCs in the server, man. They're like, like beforehand, right? I've been like, I'm a sophomore, about to be a junior now, so I've been here for like 4 semesters now, and I've known who they are for like 3. And these niggas just randomly started appearing post basketball season. Like, I tell you, like I've been around this. I live on campus now. I live on campus right now, but I lived on campus in the fall too, and I did not see these niggas like ever. Because I knew who most of them were. Obviously, it's like Pep Band starts in the fall. So I knew who they were. But now, all of a sudden, for whatever reason, I just start seeing these niggas more around campus now than more than ever. And so, like, that. Then after we had left the pool, we had gone to go get some food, and lo and behold, she was there. For what, it's like, I was like, for whatever reason, she's going to get food, obviously. But like, I'm just like, where do these niggas keep coming from? Like, I understand that they live on campus, right? Most of these niggas are like, they were in the portal, or they like got committed from like schools outside of tennis, outside of what is it called, Chattanooga. Like, I get that, but like, so they live on campus, and they're gonna be like around campus, but it's like, what? What do you? I mean, I guess where we went to eat, I don't frequent very often because that place requires real money. I ain't got that. Although they do take university currency, though, I will say that. And now that I know that, which is it's really just like, you take your ID and then you put real money on it, and then you just use that instead. Like, I think there are different ways you can get that money, like doing stuff on campus, so it's like free money, but like it's also like limited in quantity, right? So either way, right? But like, what I'm saying, like, it's so weird seeing them niggas now, because like I said, I've been here and I've known who they were for 3 semesters. And so for now, for whatever reason, they're just more common and out of the woodworks now. It's not even like, oh, it's nicer outside, because like weather in Chattanooga is whack. So it'll be sunny for like 4 days, and then it'll be rain, and I'm like, okay, cool, springtime, yay. Did this during winter too, bro. It was like 60 to 70 degrees some days during winter, and I'm very confused. Yay, yay, planet Earth. um, nah, but like that joke is, it's so crazy. Cause like, but like, one thing I've gotten better at over the years is like, one right now it's kind of just made itself into like being subdued, right? Because you get excited a lot of the times. I like to make the joke that like the basketball players are like celebrities, right? Like, dang, bro, because like, yeah, I like being up close in person, and like in person with them is a lot different than from seeing them on seeing them on the court in the bleachers, right? One, a lot of these niggas are way taller than you'd expect, and that goes for both teams, both men and women's basketball. Like, these niggas are like, they say how tall they are when they introduce the players, and then they freaking like, and then they're on the court and you can see them. You're like, dang, that nigga's tall, right? But then if you get to like, if you see them in person, like, you're like person to person with them, after, like when you get off the bleachers and whatnot, you're like, dang, these niggas are tall. Right? It just kind of is like different. You're like, what the frick? But like beyond that, right? There's like I don't know. We cheer for them so much. It's almost like there's a bit of a disconnect almost. It's not even parasocial, because I guess it's like there aren't any traits that really associate with them besides the fact that they're like, oh, they're good at basketball, right? Because it's like typically with parasocial relationships, you like it's one-sided, and the fact that like somebody exposes themselves to you, and you get that certain picture of them, so you're able to, distinguish traits onto them. It's kind of different, because these niggas just play basketball. We don't hear them talk. But yeah, like it's almost like a celebrity kind of thing, because they're kind of they don't really interact with us as much, because it's like, I don't know, there is a respect for the pen program within the athletics department, at least during basketball season. I cannot tell you about football season. And so it's like, there's obviously I guess some form of mutual respect, right? But also at the same time, them niggas kind of hold more precedent in the way that the college is than we do, right? And I think I kind of internalized that a little bit, right? So it's like, oh wow, they're a big deal, pretty much, right? It's interesting to think about though. But then when I see them in person, it's kind of different, right? Because outside of the context of like pep band season and basketball season, we're strangers, and it's like there's not really a reason to facilitate an interaction, not even based on like previous pretenses, because at that point, then it does low-key kind of feel parasocial. Dang, that kind of scared me. Yo, I'm not gonna lie. I high-key forgot what I was talking about. I'm not gonna lie. Let me pause this real quick. All right, after listening back, I can't back where I was. So it's like, seeing her in public and then being like, oh shoot, the pretenses of like pep band and like basketball season being over kind of erases any sort of like level ground that you can, like a common ground talking point you could talk about, which isn't entirely true. Like, obviously, this is like, oh yeah, she's still recognizable enough to be like, oh yeah, that's a basketball player. But at the same time, it's like,
Okay. She also seems very like kept to herself. I'm which I get that. I think half the time, I think if niggas catch me just like at the wrong time, I just look like I don't like them, which just isn't true, right? Most niggas have not given me a reason not to like them, right? So it's just kind of like, dang, well, I was just talking about this beforehand too. Um, Being outside, like being in that like bubble too, is or being in like a social bubble. It was kind of weird, right? Because um, me personally, being being black can feel kind of very strange, right? I mean, outside of like my first like 9 years of existence, why is there like it looks like a little bug on my screen? What the frick is that, man? That's so strange. Um, Outside like the first 9 years of my life, I didn't really grow up in a predominantly black space, right? Um, you know what I'm saying? So I kind of had like a bit of a fly in the milk kind of experience. I think we all have our coon years, but like I'm luckily I'm a recovered recovered coon. um, you know, I've gotten out of that space, gotten out of that mindset at least. Um, but I think it's like affected me, right? So I have a lot of symptoms of like neurodiversity, neurodivergency. Uh, right, I have a lot of symptoms that are akin to ADHD, et cetera, et cetera, and it can kind of come off in the way that I am in public spaces too. I say that all just because like masking exists and whatnot, but I think part of it is that, and then I think part of it is um the way I was just like socialized in society, right? Because being a black man in a predominantly white space, um, you kind of become tokenized almost, right? You become a monolith in your existence, which is why you hear the "wow, you're the whitest black person I've ever met" kind of deal. Um, and when those comments come up now, it's really like a what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Right? Which is I guess like a front of being like, stop being anti-black. Stop what you're doing right now because you probably don't entirely know what you're saying. So I'm gonna give you a chance to not say it again, basically. Basically, right? Niggas don't realize the type of stuff that does to people. It like especially like the younger you are and you hear, "Wow, you're so white for a black person." Like that's so damaging because right, one, you're mocking us all up to this caricature of a monolith, right? I don't wow, you're a real greasy cracker, bro. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not stereotyping every southern white boy because they're all from Alabama, right? Like, I'm not putting you all in that I'm not making you all a monolith in that case, right? We talk about the mayonnaise marauders, the Snow White termites. Oh my goodness, I love that one. The vanilla villains, right? We know what those niggas are like, right? But that's kind of like a larger symptom of society at large because a lot of niggas actually end up falling into that. It's basically akin to like anti-blackness within white spaces, which is very prevalent, very very prevalent. Um, so being socialized in that space, you kind of have to put on this false perception of, hey, let me not I guess overstep a boundary pretty much, right? One of the good ones almost, right? So it's like not that I'm aware of my tokenism now, basically, right? That like I do kind of like but it's become so ingrained into how I go about my daily life that it's really difficult to kind of reverse engineer some of those things that are inherently harmful, right? Where it's hard to have genuine discourse with anybody outside of like my house, right? Because it's really genuinely disagreeing with niggas is hard because I'm a people pleaser, but then also I think just like the whole socialization thing is just kind of molded me into a person that is like very conflict, like very opposite of conflict resilient. Um, Either way, right? You know what I mean? Very adverse to conflict is the conflict averse, essentially, is what I was looking for. Um, and so it feels very comfortable. One, like becoming very comfortable around other people can be very difficult at times just because of that reason. But then also it can be kind of really difficult to have genuine discourse with people where you're like, hey, I just disagree with you on this because it almost feels like you're overstepping a line, right? Especially in the people pleasing department, taking this out of the social context of race, right? Being in the people pleasing department where it's like, oh, wow, I could hurt this person's feelings and then they'll hate me for forever. Where it's like, well, no, even if you do like disagree on something, even it can get like slightly passionate, where there's like it will only bring nuance to the discussion. If people are passionate about something like that, they can just genuinely bring more to the table if they are just more like mentally aware of something like that. And there's just like a discourse, because you could be wrong about something, right? But it can also be like something silly too. Like, I think Kung Fu Panda is a cinematic masterpiece, and somebody could be like, Kung Fu Panda is the worst thing since colonization, which is a bit extreme. But then, you can tackle their points like, I don't really see where you're coming from. This is really like a really big love letter to like wuxia films and kung fu films and whatnot, and like Chinese cinema, Chinese action cinema as it's been produced to the West, right? Very passionate love letter to the things that we love about China. And it's like, they're like, I can't think of any negative talking points against Kung Fu Panda. I really like the movie, in case you can't tell. But like, then there could be niggas that genuinely have something to offer, where it's like, okay, cool, I didn't see that insight before, where they're like, yeah, J.K. Simmons in the third movie was really cool, but like by the time that the third movie came around, it felt kind of very farce, or something like that, right? I wasn't like, I saw the third movie, I watched it. I don't really remember it that much. Like, I remember J.K. Simmons being the villain, and he kills every role he's in. But like, I remember the second one the most, because that joke was OD. Either way, all that to say, having discourse like that is more difficult. But then if we put it back in the context of race and in the social construction type deal, it becomes more transparent. Where you're like, oh shoots. If you step out of line, essentially, if you step out of line, they're gonna look at you weird. And I'm generally around more, I guess, accepting circles in that case, but I'm also, the odd one out. One of these things is not like the other, right? And you when you're in that type of position, you can't help but notice that, right? It'd be like being a woman in a group of men, right? Being a black person being the only black person in the room, being the only Asian person in the room, being the only Hispanic person in the room, right? Like, it's so hard not to notice when you are that person, right? And so it's like, oh shoot, well, what am I supposed to do now? You know what I mean? It's just like, in my experience, it's like you just have to. Well, one, you have to learn. More about the things that you can't learn about being in those predominantly white spaces, right? So it's gonna be like, reading about more of, I guess, like Black history and historical Black figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, Bell Hooks, et cetera, right? But then it's also like, learning how to navigate the spaces too, as we were, right? Because 98% are neurodivergent. Like it's basically like there are a lot of symptoms there that show that for sure. So now it's just like being able to get like assistance with that and everything. But healthy counterbalance in that space is going to be really, really good. But yeah, and then I also like generally like crafting myself to be a better person and just like other spaces in general, right? Because I've learned there are some things that you're gonna have to unlearn as time goes on, right? Because they're just I think things culturally that get assimilated, right? Internet age, it's very, very, very easy to just project your image of a person onto them, not knowing them. And it's like, well, let's be realistic here, right? Let's be realistic about our expectations for a human being, right? Where it's like they're going to have their own flaws, and then you have to take into account their own historical background as a person, right? Which you don't initially know. You might know some things about them, right? You could be like, this nigga's from Newfoundland. Oh, this person's from like Ottawa, right? One of like the middle provinces in Canada, right? Basically, it's I was gonna say it's a cornfield. It's winter. It's winter there all the time. All that to say that it's mainly white people, right? Basically is what I'm saying. There's mainly white people in the middle of Canada, and they're not going to have as much exposure to minorities or minority issues, right? Or just like those things besides depictions of those people in pop culture. So they're probably going to have a less than ideal image of who I am as a person. And that goes for people out of the country as well, right? Where, you know, you're going to see a white person and you're going to be able to like, oh, there are so many depictions of white people in popular culture because America's very dominant in the cultural zeitgeist of like popular media just in general, right? So you're going to have a lot of representations of white people. And so you meet white people and you're going to be like, oh yeah, of course. But like, let's say you're white, let's say you're from Germany and you were exposed to like other like different types of like media, right? And if you meet like a black person, for instance, and you watched like you've only watched like I can't even think right now. I guess Family Matters, right? You've only watched Family Matters, so you think that all kids are like either Steve or I forgot what his alter ego is, bro. But either way, right? So you see most niggas as Steve Urkel, right? Or you watch, you know, you see like Family Feud and you're like, oh, all niggas are funny, like Steve Harvey. You like watch a comedy special. Oh, you're like Chris Rock. You know what I mean? We're kind of put up to these caricatures of these tokens, or like, you know, rap music, obviously, one of the largest exports of American culture, of black culture, just in general, around the world. And niggas love to dip their hands, their greasy fingers into the pot of black culture. But the only thing they love to leave in there is that oppression. They love the stuff that black people do, but they will not even glance at the pain, the oppression, the other stuff, all the ugly nonsense that comes part of that, right? One of the things that I saw that I was watching a video earlier today, and I was so profound to me was like, yeah, niggas like that. It's either like white people will like, you know, listen to that music and appropriate it by means of like being like Vanilla Ice or things like that, right? Where they become like caricatures, like Elvis. Even Elvis was like a caricature, right? Where he was like basically like all the things about rock except being black, right? Because rock is black art form. If you didn't know that, now you know. Right, but like you take that, or they'll be, you know, they'll be the niggas in the gentrified neighborhoods that project black struggle through white lens, and so they're like, oh shoot, it's not even like, they'll take the lyrics of like rap music and, you know, the things that niggas are doing by means of survival, and then they'll be like, oh, why are we personifying gangsters? Why are we like loving gangster rap? Like, you know, being like, why? Oh, this is a problem, right? Being like flipping it on its head and being like, these are like, they're exclusively glorifying these things when they're not seeing it as like a means of coping, right? And it's like, well, not to mention all these, all the white boys in the suburbs are eating this nonsense up, bro. So like playing into it does help in terms of getting them out of the well. I.e., most like a lot of white people don't understand. Don't understand it. They don't get it. And it's like, it's even if the niggas that are around you don't get it, right? But like also if you're like in a PWI, or like if you're in a country that is basically just white people, it's gonna be a lot harder for you to like untokenize, like unstereotype people that are not white, basically, right? Because if you don't have any exposure to those people, right, which is have healthy depictions of those people, well then you're just gonna start basing your things off the things that you've seen, which is, it's not your fault, but it is your problem, right? Where you're like, and then it comes in different forms too, right? Where it's like, then you could start talking about depictions of like fat people in media, right? Where they're always, basically like 99% of the time depicted as undesirable in any form of like romantic media or things like that, right? Fat people are just always like that. It's like, it's like a disrespecting almost, right? Because it's like, well, one, that's just not real life. There are people that are like overweight that do end up in relationships on a regular basis with people, right? There are people that basically fat people get into relationships all the time, and it's really, really inconsiderate and very demonizing of people that are fat, that they're just extremely hopeless, right? Because sometimes you can't help that. Sometimes it's just genetic, the way that weight sits on you, very, perpetuating unrealistic standards, et cetera, right? And this can also go for like other minority groups, Asian people, Hispanics, LGBTQ plus people, et cetera, all these different things. Either way, all that to say is that there's a certain level of empathy that you have to take in terms of conversating with somebody who might not be accustomed to seeing you. There's a bit of patience, but then, there also has to be like a level of intolerance, right? You can't let certain things slide, and you have to let that be known. And it's easier said than done, I will say, because like I said, I'm a people pleaser. It's really hard for me to do that, right? And sometimes when you feel like you're stepping out of line, you might suffer the repercussion, but it's like, sometimes it's worth it, bro. Sometimes you have to tell a nigga that they're wrong. Sometimes you have to tell a nigga like, hey, no, this messed up, right? You can do it the light way. You can be like, what do you mean by that? Right? I love the boys, but, there was some sexist remarks being thrown around. I was like, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by that? Right? Basically trying to give him the guard check. But then, like, they were making him. And I was like, well, I should have checked him right there. Could have been like, oh, come on. You know what I mean? Given that, like I said, it's a struggle. It's a constant process. You gotta help yourself, and you gotta help others too, right? But you do it in community, it'll be easier. Don't do it by yourself. But like also, there's like some time to do it by yourself. There's some self growth, and then there's communal growth too. So